Sleeping beneath London during the Blitz. When night became routine. September 1940. As evening settles across London, you gather a blanket, a small pillow, and the few belongings that matter most. The sound you wait for is not church bells or passing traffic, but the rising wail of the air raid siren. It has become part of the city's nightly rhythm, announcing another journey underground. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You descend the worn stone steps into the London Underground station, joining hundreds of neighbours who quietly arrange themselves along the platform. Office workers, shopkeepers, railway staff, children and grandparents all transform the station into a temporary village. Families mark out small spaces with blankets, while volunteers distribute tea and simple comforts. Conversations remain gentle, almost whispered, as everyone conserves energy for another uncertain night. Above, members of the Air Raid Precautions Service patrol darkened streets, enforcing blackout regulations that prevent even a sliver of light from escaping a window. Their work is rarely remembered, yet these quiet routines help reduce the visibility of the city to enemy bombers. Far overhead, aircraft engines become a distant, steady hum. Occasionally, the platform trembles almost imperceptibly as explosions echo through the streets above. Yet life below continues with remarkable discipline. Someone opens a newspaper, a child drifts to sleep against a parent's shoulder. Another traveller carefully folds a coat beneath their head, already practiced in making hard stone feel almost comfortable. In wartime, rest becomes its own form of endurance. Every hour of sleep is quietly borrowed from uncertainty, preparing ordinary people for another day that must somehow begin. As the sounds above fade into the background, you wonder whether true sleep comes from silence or simply from learning to live beside the noise. The long hours beneath the streets. The station settles into a rhythm that feels almost timeless. You notice how every family develops its own quiet routine, refined after weeks of returning to the same platform. Blankets are folded with care. Shoes are placed neatly beside makeshift beds. Children are encouraged to whisper rather than speak, as though the entire station has agreed upon an unspoken rule of kindness. The air carries familiar scents: damp concrete, warm wool coats, coal smoke clinging to clothing from the streets above, and the comforting aroma of tea poured from large metal urns. Volunteers from local organisations move patiently through the crowds, offering drinks, bread, or a reassuring smile. Their work rarely appears in military histories, yet it helps sustain morale as surely as any weapon. Time passes differently underground. There are no stars to measure the night, only station clocks and the occasional arrival of a train that no longer carries ordinary commuters. Between distant rumbles from above, many people read books by shaded lamps, write brief diary entries, mend worn clothing, or simply close their eyes without truly sleeping. Even the silence has texture, interrupted only by the soft rustle of blankets or the steady breathing of hundreds of strangers sharing the same refuge. Above ground, firefighters, rescue teams, railway workers, and utility crews continue their own night shifts, preparing to repair damaged streets before the city awakens. Their efforts ensure that London can continue functioning each morning, despite the destruction of the previous night. As midnight slowly drifts toward dawn, you begin to understand that survival is often built not through dramatic moments, but through countless ordinary routines repeated with quiet determination. And as another distant vibration rolls gently through the tunnels, you find yourself wondering whether courage is sometimes nothing more than returning to the same place, night after night, without losing hope. Dawn returns to the city. A faint change in the air tells you morning is approaching long before sunlight reaches the station. The platform slowly awakens. Blankets are folded with practiced hands, pillows tucked into canvas bags, and children gently roused from surprisingly deep sleep. Around you, hundreds of ordinary Londoners prepare to climb back toward a city they have not seen since darkness fell. The all-clear siren finally echoes through the tunnels. It is neither triumphant nor dramatic. Instead, It signals another quiet transition from shelter to responsibility. You join the steady stream ascending the escalators, where cool morning air carries the scent of damp brick, smoke, and fresh rain. Above ground, the night's work is already underway. Firefighters extinguish the last stubborn embers, while engineers inspect railway lines, water mains, and electrical cables. Bus crews alter routes around damaged streets. Shopkeepers sweep broken glass from their entrances before unlocking their doors. Postal workers sort letters despite interruptions, and milk deliveries continue whenever possible. These routines, repeated day after day, become acts of resilience as meaningful as any military operation. The city bears fresh scars. Some buildings stand untouched beside empty lots where homes once stood. Yet church bells still mark the hour, factory whistles call workers to their shifts, and markets gradually reopen. London refuses to remain frozen in the previous night's uncertainty. Historians often remember the Blitz through statistics, months of bombing, thousands of casualties, and countless buildings damaged. Yet the quieter story belongs to those who carried blankets into underground stations each evening, accepted another restless night, and emerged every morning determined to keep daily life moving forward. As you leave the station behind, the first sunlight filters through lingering smoke, illuminating a city that has endured one more night. It is a reminder that history is shaped not only by famous leaders and decisive battles, but also by ordinary people who found enough rest to face another dawn. And perhaps that is the gentlest lesson of all. When the night finally passes, it is often the smallest routines, the folding of a blanket, the sharing of tea, the opening of a shop, that quietly carry a nation toward tomorrow. The RAF ground crew who worked until dawn, the airfield never truly slept. The evening light fades across a Royal Air Force fighter station in southern England during the Battle of Britain. While pilots gather most of history's attention, your work begins only after many of them have landed. Wearing oil-stained overalls beneath a heavy jacket, you walk across damp grass toward a line of weary aircraft. The engines have fallen silent, but the airfield itself remains wide awake. The smell is unmistakable, a mixture of aviation fuel, warm engine oil, wet earth, and freshly cut grass flattened beneath countless boots and wheels. One by one, the fighters are guided into dispersal pens, where camouflage nets and earth banks offer some protection from enemy reconnaissance. Every aircraft carries a story written in scratches, leaking hoses, worn tires, and panels dusted with soot. You join a small team of fitters and riggers, each responsible for a different task. One mechanic inspects the Merlin engine by the light of a shaded lamp. Another carefully reloads ammunition belts into the wings. Armourers examine every mechanism with patient precision, while electricians test radios and navigation lights. Nothing is hurried, yet nothing can be delayed. Every inspection completed tonight may determine whether the aircraft can safely fly tomorrow. The hours pass quietly, measured by toolboxes opening and closing, the soft click of spanners against metal, and the distant call of an owl beyond the perimeter fence. Somewhere nearby, a kettle whistles inside a maintenance hut, offering a brief pause before another inspection begins. Few newspapers celebrate these long shifts, but the pilots depend entirely upon the unseen hands working beneath the wings after darkness falls. Victory in the air begins with countless careful checks on the ground. As another aircraft rolls slowly into its shelter, you wonder how many quiet nights of patient maintenance are hidden behind every famous moment in the skies above. By the light of hooded lamps. The night grows cooler as dew settles across the grass, leaving every wing and fuselage covered in a thin layer of moisture. You pull your jacket tighter before climbing onto a maintenance stand beside the aircraft. Bright lights are avoided whenever possible. Hooded lamps cast narrow circles of yellow light, preserving the blackout while allowing each mechanic to concentrate on the work directly in front of them. Every task follows a familiar rhythm. Engine cowling panels are removed and carefully stacked. Fuel lines are checked for leaks. Hydraulic connections are tightened. Control cables are inspected by hand, feeling for the slightest sign of wear that might escape the eye. A missing split pin or a loose fastener is never dismissed as a small problem. In aviation, tiny details often determine whether an aircraft returns home. Nearby, armourers replenish ammunition and, when required, carefully fit new bombs for the following day's operations. Others refill oxygen bottles, service radio equipment, and record every completed repair in maintenance logs. These handwritten entries become a quiet record of endurance, documenting the countless hours spent keeping each aircraft airworthy. Tea arrives in chipped enamel mugs, offering warmth more than refreshment. Conversations remain brief. Most of the crew save their energy, knowing another wave of aircraft could arrive before dawn with fresh repairs waiting. Above them, the sky appears calm, scattered with stars that reveal nothing of the demands tomorrow may bring. The airfield itself seems to breathe slowly through the darkness, sustained by discipline rather than urgency. Every wrench turned, every inspection completed, is another promise that the day's pilots will have the best chance of returning safely. As the eastern horizon begins to lose its deepest shade of black, you find yourself wondering whether history remembers the victories in the sky more easily than the quiet hands that prepared them below. First light across the airfield. The darkness begins to soften as the first pale light spreads across the horizon. The outlines of the hangars become clearer, and the aircraft standing quietly in their dispersal pens slowly emerge from the shadows. Your hands are stained with oil despite repeated washing, and your boots carry the damp earth of another night spent beneath wings instead of beneath blankets. One final inspection begins before the day's flying. Fuel tanks have been filled, ammunition belts sit neatly loaded within the wings. Control surfaces move freely as another mechanic gently tests them from the cockpit while you watch each hinge and linkage respond. A fitter signs the maintenance log, adding one more careful entry to a record that may never be read beyond the station, yet remains essential to every flight that follows. Around the airfield, life gathers momentum. The station kitchen prepares breakfast for crews coming off duty and those about to begin another day. A weather officer studies cloud cover and wind direction before delivering the morning forecast. Drivers carry spare parts between workshops, while wireless operators listen attentively for reports arriving from the radar stations along Britain's coastline. Soon the pilots appear, quietly collecting maps and receiving their briefings. Many exchange familiar nods with the ground crew before climbing into their aircraft. There is rarely time for long conversations. Respect is shown through trust rather than words. Each pilot trusts that unseen hands have examined every bolt, every fuel line, and every moving surface during the long hours of darkness. As engines awaken one by one, the familiar growl of the Merlin fills the cool morning air. The aircraft taxi toward the runway, disappearing into the brightening sky. Only after the last fighter has lifted away do you allow yourself a brief moment of stillness. History often celebrates those who flew into danger, yet every successful sortie also belonged to the mechanics, armourers, fitters, electricians, drivers, cooks, clerks, and countless others whose work rarely appeared in headlines. Their victories were measured not in medals, but in aircraft that returned safely to land again. The sun now rests above the English countryside, warming the dew-covered grass where you stood through the night. Another shift has ended, but another will begin before long. In war, even the quietest routine carries extraordinary weight, and as you walk toward the mess hall for a well-earned breakfast, you cannot help but wonder whether the truest measure of resilience is found not in moments of glory, but in the willingness to begin the same careful work again when evening returns. Winter watch in the Ardennes forest, a quiet post among the pines, December 1944. Snow settles gently across the Ardennes forest, covering muddy roads, fallen branches, and abandoned leaves beneath a blanket of white. You pull your wool greatcoat closer against the cold as you begin another watch. Around you, the forest seems almost peaceful, its tall pine trees muffling sound until even distant footsteps disappear into the stillness. Your unit occupies a small defensive position along a narrow woodland road. There is no dramatic battle at this moment, only the steady discipline of soldiers preparing for another winter night. Sandbags have frozen hard around shallow foxholes, and rough timber reinforces dugouts built to shield against wind as much as enemy fire. The greatest challenge this evening is not movement on the horizon, but the relentless cold that creeps through boots, gloves, and heavy clothing. A small field stove burns carefully inside a nearby shelter. Its warmth is precious, but so is its concealment. Too much smoke could reveal your position, so dry wood is chosen whenever possible, producing less visible vapor against the pale winter sky. Nearby, another soldier brushes fresh snow from radio equipment, protecting the batteries from freezing temperatures that weaken their performance. The night unfolds according to routine. Sentries are relieved every few hours to prevent exhaustion. Hot coffee is shared from insulated containers, and rations are eaten slowly, more for warmth than hunger. Maps are checked beneath shielded flashlights, while officers quietly compare weather reports with the condition of nearby roads. In winter, ice and snow often influence military decisions as much as any opposing force. Above the forest, clouds drift slowly across a sky filled with faint stars. The silence feels complete, broken only by the occasional creak of snow-laden branches settling beneath their own weight. Standing your watch, you begin to understand that endurance in winter is built from hundreds of ordinary choices, keeping your feet dry, checking a companion's gloves, and remaining alert even when nothing seems to change. As another hour quietly passes beneath the towering pines, you wonder whether the longest nights are measured by the clock or by the patience required to stand faithfully through them. The weight of winter silence. The hours after midnight seem to move more slowly than the evening before. The forest grows quieter still, as though the falling snow absorbs every remaining sound. You stamp your boots gently against the frozen ground, not from impatience, but to keep feeling in your toes. Cold is an opponent that never rests. It asks for constant attention, quietly testing every soldier's discipline. Your watch is relieved, and you step into a timber-lined dugout roofed with logs, earth, and a fresh layer of snow that helps insulate against the bitter air. A dim lantern hangs from a beam, casting a warm glow over damp gloves, drying socks, and steel helmets resting on wooden pegs. Someone carefully stirs a small pot of coffee, while another studies a weathered map spread across an ammunition crate serving as a table. Conversation remains subdued. A letter from home is read once more before being folded back into a pocket. Another soldier quietly repairs a loose button on his heavy overcoat. Nearby, the radio operator listens through static for routine reports from neighboring positions, recording each message with steady handwriting despite the cold. Outside, engineers continue clearing sections of road where drifting snow threatens to block the movement of supply trucks. Drivers fit tire chains before attempting icy hills, while quartermasters calculate how much fuel, food, and firewood will be needed if the weather worsens. Long before any engagement begins, armies depend upon these patient calculations to survive another day. Eventually, your turn on watch comes again. You return to the foxhole, where the stars have disappeared behind thickening clouds. The forest remains still, offering no hint of what tomorrow might bring. Yet the routine continues exactly as it has throughout the night. Observe, report, wait, and endure. As another snowflake settles silently on your sleeve before melting away, you find yourself wondering whether resilience is sometimes nothing more than meeting each quiet hour with the same unwavering resolve. Dawn through the frost. A faint silver light begins to filter through the dense pines, softening the darkness that has surrounded the forest for so many hours. The night has passed without fanfare. There has been no dramatic charge, no triumphant announcement, only the quiet completion of another winter watch. You climb carefully from the foxhole, stretching stiff muscles that have resisted the cold since sunset. Frost clings to the edges of your greatcoat, and your breath lingers in the still morning air before disappearing among the trees. Around the position, the camp slowly comes to life. The field kitchen is already awake. A cook stirs a pot of hot oatmeal while another slices dark bread for the morning meal. Steam rises gently into the cold air before vanishing among the branches. Nearby, medics inspect soldiers for the earliest signs of frostbite, knowing that cold injuries can quietly remove a man from duty as surely as any battlefield wound. Supply vehicles begin their cautious journey along narrow forest roads. Drivers move slowly over frozen ground, avoiding patches of black ice hidden beneath fresh snow. Engineers check wooden bridges weakened by repeated freezing and thawing, while signal crews inspect telephone lines sagging beneath the weight of ice. Every task is ordinary, every task is essential. The officers officers gather for the morning briefing, comparing weather observations with reports from neighboring units. In the Ardennes, winter itself often shaped the pace of military operations. Snow, fog, and frozen roads could delay reinforcements, conceal movement, or slow the delivery of food, ammunition, and fuel. Nature remained a constant companion to every decision. As sunlight gradually reaches the tops of the pine trees, you realize that surviving the night was never the work of one individual. It depended upon sentries who stayed awake, cooks who prepared warm meals, mechanics who kept vehicles running, engineers who maintained roads, and countless others whose names rarely appeared in official histories. When people remember the Ardennes, they often think of maps marked with arrows and famous commanders directing armies across Europe. Yet for the ordinary soldier, history was experienced one watch at a time, one hot drink, one repaired glove, one careful step across frozen ground. The forest, so silent through the night, now echoes with the ordinary sounds of another morning. Boots crunch through fresh snow. Engines gradually come to life. Someone laughs quietly over breakfast before another day's duties begin. As you shoulder your pack and watch sunlight spread across the white landscape, one thought remains. Perhaps history is not carried forward only by extraordinary victories, but by ordinary people who quietly endure another cold dawn together. A Soviet nurse's quiet night outside Stalingrad. The lamplight in the dressing station. It is the winter of 1942-1943 on the outskirts of Stalingrad. Beyond the frozen fields, the city has become a landscape of shattered brick, twisted steel, and drifting snow. Yet your place tonight is not among the frontline ruins. Instead, you begin your shift inside a small field dressing station, a canvas tent reinforced with timber where quiet determination matters as much as medical skill. A hurricane lamp hangs from a wooden beam, its gentle flame casting soft shadows across neatly arranged bandages, enamel bowls, and carefully sterilized instruments. The warmth inside is modest, just enough to keep water from freezing and medicines usable. Every item has its place because supplies arrive only through long and difficult journeys across winter roads. You pull on thick wool gloves before stepping outside to collect fresh snow for melting. Clean water is precious. The snow will be heated over a small iron stove, then used to wash hands, clean equipment, and prepare warm drinks. Even this simple task becomes part of survival. Inside, another nurse quietly folds fresh dressings while a medical orderly records names, temperatures, and treatment notes in a worn ledger. A doctor reviews supplies with careful attention. Gauze, antiseptic, morphine, and blankets are counted one by one. Nothing is wasted. Between arrivals, the station grows remarkably peaceful. The wind brushes gently against the tent canvas. Somewhere nearby, a field kitchen prepares soup for soldiers ending their watch. A radio crackles softly with routine messages, most concerning transport, weather, and supply requests rather than dramatic battlefield news. The work is repetitive, patient, and unending. Instruments are cleaned again. Lamps are trimmed. Bedding is straightened. Boots are dried near the stove before the next journey into the cold. You begin to understand that healing during war is often built from countless quiet routines, rather than extraordinary moments. Every clean bandage prepared before midnight may comfort someone before dawn. As the lamp flickers gently against the canvas walls, you wonder whether hope sometimes survives not through grand victories, but through the steady hands that refuse to stop caring. The hours between midnight and morning. The deepest part of the night settles over the frozen steppe, and the dressing station grows quieter than you imagined possible. Outside, the wind carries fine crystals of snow across the ground, whispering against the canvas walls. Inside, the steady warmth of the iron stove creates a gentle contrast to the bitter cold beyond the entrance flap. You refill the stove with carefully measured pieces of dry wood. Fuel is never taken for granted. Every log has traveled a long distance through snow-covered roads, hauled by trucks, horses, or determined soldiers who understand that warmth is as valuable as medicine during the Russian winter. A kettle begins to simmer, filling the shelter with the familiar scent of hot tea. Small enamel cups are passed from hand to hand without ceremony. No one speaks very much. After months of continuous work, silence has become another form of understanding among the medical staff. A transport sled arrives, pulled slowly through the snow. the patients are received calmly and without haste. Wet coats are removed, blankets are wrapped around chilled shoulders, and names are carefully entered into the medical register. Before any treatment begins, frozen fingers and boots are inspected for signs of cold injury. Preventing frostbite is often just as important as treating wounds. When the immediate work is finished, the station returns to its quiet rhythm. Fresh bandages are rolled. Surgical instruments are boiled once again for sterilization. Empty medicine bottles are counted before the next resupply convoy arrives. Every action is deliberate, repeated exactly as it was the night before, because consistency itself has become a safeguard against exhaustion and mistakes. Far beyond the tent, supply columns continue moving through darkness, bringing food, medical equipment, fuel, and blankets toward the front. Their slow progress rarely appears in history books, yet without them, the small lamp above your head would soon grow dim. As you trim the wick to keep its light steady, you begin to wonder whether endurance is sometimes found not in extraordinary strength, but in the quiet decision to perform one more careful task before the first light of morning. When the sky turned pale, the darkness begins to soften, almost unnoticed. At first, the change is only a faint silver glow filtering through the frost that has formed along the edges of the canvas. Then, little by little, the eastern horizon brightens beyond the snow-covered fields surrounding the dressing station. Another winter night has quietly given way to morning. You step outside for a brief moment, drawing a slow breath of air so cold it seems to pause time itself. Fresh snow muffles every footstep. The landscape appears untouched, although countless people have worked through the night to keep the front supplied, the wounded treated, and the machinery of survival moving forward. Inside the shelter, the night shift begins preparing for the day's staff. Blankets are folded neatly before being warmed again near the stove. Medical instruments receive one final inspection before being returned to their proper places. Fresh water, melted from snow collected during the night, is poured into clean containers for the next round of treatments. The morning report is written with careful handwriting. Every patient admitted, every bandage used, every medicine dispensed is recorded with quiet precision. These pages rarely become famous historical documents, yet together they tell another story of the war, one measured not by captured ground, but by lives patiently preserved through ordinary work. Outside, transport trucks slowly emerge from the snowy roads, bringing new supplies gathered from depots many kilometers away. Drivers brush frost from their windscreens before continuing toward field hospitals farther east. Nearby, cooks prepare breakfast in steaming field kitchens, while mechanics inspect engines stiffened by the freezing night. Every role, however humble, contributes to the day's survival. When many people imagine Stalingrad, they picture smoke, shattered buildings, and relentless fighting. Yet thousands also remember quieter moments like these, warming frozen hands beside a stove, sharing tea in enamel cups, writing names carefully into ledgers, or finding a few minutes of rest before another shift began. Those small acts of care rarely changed headlines, but they changed lives. As the first rays of sunlight stretch across the white landscape, the hurricane lamp that guided your work through the darkness is gently extinguished. Its task is complete until evening returns. You leave the dressing station knowing that history is often sustained by people whose names never appear in speeches or monuments. They stitched wounds, boiled water, counted supplies, and offered calm voices during the longest nights. Their courage was quiet, but no less enduring. And as another cold morning begins beyond the canvas walls, you find yourself wondering whether the greatest victories of any war are sometimes the lives gently carried from one dawn to the next. Sleeping. Inside a Normandy hedgerow shelter, beneath the ancient hedges. It is June 1944, only days after the Allied landings in Normandy. Beyond the beaches, the countryside unfolds into a patchwork of small fields divided by centuries-old hedgerows known as the bocage. These towering banks of earth, crowned with dense shrubs and trees, were originally built to mark farmland. During the campaign, they became natural walls that shaped nearly every movement across the landscape. As evening approaches, your platoon receives orders to remain in position until first light. Instead of buildings or permanent shelters, you settle beside one of the thick hedgerows. Its roots grip a raised embankment, offering modest protection from wind and observation alike. The ground is uneven, still damp from recent rain, and carries the rich scent of wet soil mixed with crushed grass. The first task is not sleep, but preparation. Helmets are placed within easy reach. Rifles are carefully cleaned before moisture can settle inside their mechanisms. Boots are loosened but never completely removed, so that every soldier can stand quickly if needed. Nearby, a radio operator checks the battery of his wireless set, while another soldier quietly refills canteens from water that has already been purified by the unit. A small meal follows: tinned meat, hard biscuits, and tea warmed over a compact field stove provide comfort more through routine than flavor. Conversations remain soft, carried only a few feet before disappearing into the leafy walls surrounding the position. Somewhere beyond the hedges, cows continue grazing in distant pastures, a quiet reminder that this peaceful farmland has suddenly become part of one of history's largest military campaigns. As darkness settles, sentries rotate into position, while others spread waterproof ground sheets beneath wool blankets. Sleep will come only in short intervals, interrupted by watch changes and whispered reports. Rest, here, is measured not by hours but by opportunities. Every quiet moment beneath the sheltering branches prepares you for another demanding day among the narrow Norman lanes. As the breeze gently stirs the leaves overhead, you wonder whether even the oldest hedgerows could have imagined the thousands of weary soldiers who would one day seek peaceful sleep beneath their branches. The Night Watch. Between the hedges. Night settles gently over the Norman countryside, and the ancient bocage seems to draw the darkness into itself. The high earthen banks and tangled branches soften the breeze, leaving only the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. You pull your blanket a little closer, careful not to disturb the soldier beside you, who has finally drifted into a light sleep after a long day's march. The platoon follows a familiar rhythm. Every 2 hours, the sentries exchange places with quiet nods rather than spoken words. A corporal checks that everyone knows the password for the night, while the radio operator listens patiently through bursts of static for routine updates from company headquarters. Most of the messages concern supply routes, unit positions, and tomorrow's objectives rather than immediate danger. Nearby, an engineer patrol has spent the evening marking narrow gaps through the hedgerows with discrete strips of white tape, helping vehicles and infantry navigate the maze at first light. Drivers farther behind the front continue delivering fuel, ammunition, medical supplies, and fresh rations along roads crowded with trucks moving under strict blackout conditions. Their slow, careful journeys rarely become famous, yet every crate unloaded before sunrise will sustain another day's advance. You brush away the moisture gathering on your rifle before laying it carefully within reach. Dew settles on helmets, packs, and blankets alike, reminding everyone that the Norman summer can still leave the night surprisingly cold. Sleep arrives only in brief stretches, never deep enough to lose awareness of the quiet world beyond the hedge. Looking upward through the branches, you catch small patches of starlight between the leaves. They seem unchanged by the events unfolding below, shining with the same calm certainty they have offered travelers and farmers for generations. As another watch begins and another ends, you wonder whether the peaceful rhythm of the countryside will one day remember the footsteps of soldiers as gently as it remembers the passing seasons. Morning beyond the bocage. The first hint of dawn arrives not with sunlight, but with birdsong. One by one, small voices emerge from the hedgerows, gradually replacing the silence that has wrapped the countryside throughout the night. You open your eyes to a sky turning from deep blue to pale grey, while beads of dew sparkle across every blade of grass. Around the position, the platoon quietly prepares for another day. Blankets are rolled tightly and secured to packs. Ground sheets are shaken free of moisture before being folded away. A kettle warms over a compact stove, and soon the familiar scent of tea drifts through the cool morning air. Breakfast is simple: hardtack biscuits, preserved meat, and strong tea, but the routine itself offers reassurance. Nearby, a mechanic checks the engine of a light utility vehicle that struggled through muddy lanes the previous evening. Engineers examine the narrow farm tracks, ensuring that heavier vehicles can pass without becoming trapped. Signal crews repair telephone wire stretched through the hedgerows during the night, restoring communication between forward positions and headquarters. The battlefield awakens through maintenance long before movement begins. As the sunlight slowly reaches the tops of the ancient trees, the countryside briefly resembles the peaceful farmland it had been for centuries. Stone cottages stand quietly in the distance. Orchard trees sway in the gentle breeze. Farmers who remain in the region cautiously begin tending livestock whenever circumstances allow, adapting their daily lives to the presence of armies moving through their fields. The Normandy bocage challenged military planners with its maze of enclosed fields and hidden lanes, but it also offered moments of shelter to exhausted soldiers seeking a few precious hours of rest. Beneath those thick hedgerows, ordinary routines continued, boots drying in the morning sun, equipment cleaned with care, letters tucked safely into jacket pockets, and friendships strengthened through shared hardship. As your platoon shoulders its packs and steps onto another narrow country lane, the night's stillness slowly fades into memory, yet its quiet lessons remain. Endurance is often found not in grand victories, but in the patience to prepare, rest when possible, and greet each new dawn with steady resolve. Perhaps the old hedgerows remember every season equally, the harvests, the storms, and the passing armies, standing silently as witnesses while history moves gently onward. The U-boat crew beneath the Atlantic, beneath the quiet sea. It is the spring of 1943, deep in the North Atlantic. Far above, grey waves rise and fall beneath an overcast sky, but you see none of them. Your world is a steel cylinder only a few meters wide, where every passageway is narrow, every bunk is shared, and every sound carries through the pressure hull. You move carefully between pipes, valves, and electrical panels, mindful not to disturb another sailor resting after his watch. Space aboard the submarine is precious. Even fresh bread, loaded before departure, hangs from overhead pipes to keep it dry for as long as possible. Every corner serves more than one purpose. The air feels warm and carries the mingled scents of diesel fuel, lubricating oil, machinery, damp clothing, and strong coffee. Fresh air disappeared days ago, replaced by the steady rhythm of ventilation fans and the constant awareness that thousands of meters of ocean surround your small crew. The routine begins with inspection rather than excitement. Gauges are checked. Battery levels are recorded with careful handwriting. Electric motors are monitored for unusual vibrations. A machinist wipes away a thin layer of condensation forming on exposed metal, preventing moisture from becoming tomorrow's problem. Meals are simple but welcome. Bread, preserved meat, potatoes, and hot soup provide comfort during long hours beneath the sea. Conversation remains quiet. Most sailors save their energy, knowing the submarine operates around the clock. While one watch rests, another listens through hydrophones, studies charts, or monitors the engines that carry everyone safely forward. Sleep comes in borrowed spaces. Bunks are often shared between sailors working different watches, a practice sometimes called hot bunking. One crew member rises for duty, just as another quietly takes his place, careful not to waste a moment of precious rest. As the submarine glides silently beneath the Atlantic, the steady hum of electric motors becomes almost hypnotic. Time is measured not by sunrise or sunset, but by changing watches, maintenance routines, and the patient discipline required to remain hidden beneath the waves. And as another quiet hour passes inside the steel hull, you wonder whether the ocean above has any memory of those who traveled so silently beneath its surface. The rhythm of the watch. There is no dawn beneath the sea. The passage of time is marked instead by the ship's clock and the orderly exchange of watches. As one team finishes its duties, another quietly takes over, moving through the narrow compartments with practiced familiarity so that no unnecessary noise disturbs those trying to sleep. You begin your watch in the control room. The dim red lighting preserves night vision while reducing glare on gauges and instruments. The helmsman maintains a steady course with only the smallest adjustments. Beside him, another sailor carefully records the submarine's estimated position calculating speed and distance traveled since the previous entry in the logbook. Elsewhere, the routine continues uninterrupted. Engineers inspect pumps and cooling systems. Electricians monitor the batteries that power the submarine while submerged. The cook, working in a remarkably compact galley, prepares another meal despite having barely enough room to turn around. Every task is performed with quiet precision because there is little margin for error beneath the ocean. Condensation gathers on the steel hull as the warmer air inside meets the cold Atlantic waters outside. Cloths are used repeatedly to wipe away the moisture, protecting equipment from corrosion. Personal belongings remain few: a family photograph tucked inside a locker, a carefully folded letter, perhaps a small notebook where a sailor records thoughts that may never be shared. The silence is occasionally broken by the hydrophone operator who listens intently through headphones for distant propellers carried by the water. Most of the sounds are ordinary: the slow movement of waves, the creaking of the hull under pressure, the constant heartbeat of the submarine itself. Hours drift together until routine becomes strangely comforting. The same inspections, the same careful records, the same shared determination that every valve, every battery, and every gasket must continue performing exactly as intended. As you quietly close another entry in the engineering log, you begin to wonder whether endurance beneath the sea depends less upon courage than upon faithfully repeating the smallest tasks, hour after hour. Returning to the surface. A gentle command passes quietly through the submarine. After long hours beneath the Atlantic, preparations begin to surface. Valves are checked one final time. Instruments receive careful inspection, and every crew member moves with the calm efficiency that routine has built over many weeks at sea. Gradually, the submarine rises through darker water toward the faint light filtering from above. The pressure changes almost imperceptibly. Then comes a familiar sensation, a subtle roll as the vessel reaches the surface, followed by the welcome sound of waves brushing against the hull. Fresh air floods inside when the hatch is opened. After days breathing the warm, recycled atmosphere below, the cool Atlantic breeze feels almost unimaginable. Sailors step cautiously onto the conning tower, taking slow breaths while scanning the endless horizon. Above them, clouds drift across an open sky that seems impossibly vast after so much time surrounded by steel walls. Below deck, work continues despite the change in scenery. Diesel engines are started to recharge the batteries that powered the submarine underwater. Engineers monitor temperatures and oil pressure, while radio operators receive coded messages. Charts are updated with the latest position, and supplies are counted carefully to determine how long the patrol can continue. Life aboard the submarine has always depended on routine more than drama. Clean machinery, disciplined watchkeeping, careful navigation, and mutual trust bind the crew together far more reliably than moments of action. Every sailor understands that the smallest overlooked detail could affect everyone aboard. As evening approaches once more, the hatch is secured and preparations quietly begin for another dive beneath the waves. The familiar cycle starts again: descent, watchkeeping, maintenance, meals, rest, and patient endurance. Many histories of the Atlantic campaign focus on naval strategy and convoy battles. Yet beneath those larger events were ordinary sailors living within narrow compartments, measuring their days by clocks instead of sunlight, finding companionship in routine, and preserving their vessel through countless acts of quiet professionalism. As the last glimpse of daylight disappears above, you realize that the sea asks for patience more often than heroism. It rewards those who respect its rhythms and reminds every traveler that even in the deepest waters, hope can be sustained by the smallest daily rituals. Perhaps that is why the ocean remains so peaceful from a distance. It keeps the quiet stories of those who passed beneath its surface, carrying them gently with every tide. Rain, Mosquitoes, and the Pacific island Garrison. Another evening beneath the jungle canopy. It is late 1943 on a small Pacific island. The day's heat has finally begun to fade, but the air remains heavy with humidity. As the sun disappears behind tall coconut palms and dense tropical forest, another evening quietly settles over the Garrison. Here, the weather is as constant a companion as any fellow soldier. You adjust the sleeves of your lightweight uniform before beginning another evening inspection of the camp. Unlike the frozen forests of Europe or the crowded shelters beneath London, life here revolves around moisture. Canvas tents must be dried whenever the sun appears. Boots require constant cleaning to prevent mildew. Weapons are lightly oiled each day because rust forms quickly in the warm, salty air. The first sound of night is not machinery, but nature itself. Tree frogs begin their chorus. Insects hum continuously among the broad leaves. Somewhere beyond the camp, gentle waves reach the shoreline with a slow, unchanging rhythm. It is peaceful enough that, for a brief moment, you could almost forget that this quiet island has become part of a global conflict. A medical orderly walks through the camp, reminding everyone to pull mosquito nets tightly around their sleeping areas. Mosquitoes carry diseases that have affected military campaigns throughout history, and prevention has become an essential part of every evening routine. Nearby, another soldier checks drainage ditches dug around the tents, ensuring that heavy rain will not flood the camp overnight. Supper is simple: rice, preserved meat, tropical fruit when available, and hot tea. The meal is eaten slowly beneath a shelter roof while rain clouds gather in the distance. No one seems surprised. On many Pacific islands, rainfall is expected almost as reliably as sunrise. As darkness deepens beneath the jungle canopy, lanterns are shaded to preserve the blackout. Conversations become quieter, and the camp gradually settles into its familiar nightly rhythm of watch rotations, equipment maintenance, and careful preparation for another humid dawn. Listening to the steady chorus of insects beyond the tents, you begin to wonder whether survival sometimes depends less on defeating an enemy than on learning to live in harmony with the landscape itself. The rain that never truly ends. Sometime after midnight, the first drops begin to fall upon the canvas roofs. Within moments, the gentle tapping becomes a steady tropical rain, drumming softly across every shelter in the camp. You wake instinctively, not because of alarm, but because the sound has become part of nightly life. On many Pacific islands, rain arrives so often that soldiers learn to measure time by its familiar rhythm. You step outside beneath the edge of the shelter. The warm rain carries the scent of wet earth, palm leaves, and salt drifting inland from the sea. Water quickly gathers in shallow channels that engineers dug around the tents earlier that evening. Their careful work keeps sleeping areas dry, proving once again that simple preparations often matter more than dramatic efforts. Nearby, a small maintenance team checks tarpaulins stretched over ammunition stores and food supplies. Moisture is a constant adversary. Wooden crates are lifted off the ground to prevent rot. Radios are covered with waterproof canvas, and spare uniforms hang beneath sheltered racks, hoping to dry before the next storm inevitably arrives. The camp itself remains remarkably calm. A sentry quietly changes watch beneath a poncho glistening with rain. Another soldier wipes condensation from binocular lenses before returning to his observation post. In the medical tent, corpsmen inspect mosquito nets and distribute anti-malarial tablets according to a carefully maintained schedule. Disease has shaped many Pacific campaigns, and nightly prevention is treated with the same seriousness as any military order. As the rain continues, conversations are replaced by the soothing rhythm of falling water. Some soldiers write letters home beneath dim lanterns. Others quietly repair torn clothing or clean equipment that tomorrow's humidity will challenge once again. Hours pass without urgency. The jungle seems content to remind every visitor that nature follows its own patient timetable, unchanged by uniforms or national flags. Listening to the endless rainfall blending with the distant surf, you begin to wonder whether the greatest lesson of the island is not how to overcome its climate, but how to endure it with quiet acceptance. Sunrise through the palm trees. Just before dawn, the rain begins to fade. The steady drumming on the canvas roof slows to scattered drops that fall from broad palm leaves onto the ground below. A pale band of light appears beyond the ocean, and the island gradually awakens beneath a sky washed clean by the night's storm. You step carefully along the muddy paths connecting the tents. The air feels cooler than it did the evening before, though the familiar humidity is already returning. Around the camp, the day's first routines begin without hurry. Blankets are hung to dry. Boots are wiped clean of mud before it can harden. Rifles are disassembled, lightly cleaned, and coated with a thin layer of oil to protect them from the relentless moisture that settles over everything. Near the shoreline, engineers inspect wooden piers where small landing craft have delivered food, fuel, medical supplies, and mail. Salt water and tropical weather wear away timber surprisingly quickly, so repairs are made whenever daylight allows. Quartermasters count crates of rice, tinned meat, flour, kerosene, and spare machine parts, ensuring that enough provisions remain until the next convoy reaches the island. The medical staff begin another round of inspections. Mosquito nets are folded away after being checked for tears, water containers are treated to discourage insects, and every soldier receives reminders about hydration, hygiene, and malaria prevention. Throughout the Pacific Campaign, illness claimed thousands of soldiers from every side, making careful sanitation one of the most important duties in camp. As the sun climbs higher, the jungle reveals countless shades of green. Bright birds move through the canopy, while butterflies drift across clearings where military tents stand among coconut trees. It is a striking contrast, a landscape of extraordinary beauty quietly sharing space with the routines of wartime life. When historians remember the Pacific, they often picture naval battles, island landings, and dramatic maps stretching across the ocean. Yet countless days were spent maintaining camps, drying equipment after rainstorms, repairing roads, filling sandbags, treating mosquito bites, and patiently adapting to an environment that demanded respect every single day. You shoulder your pack as another work detail begins. Somewhere, a cook stirs breakfast over a field stove. A radio operator adjusts his headset before recording the morning weather report. Mechanics start generators that have rested through the night. The camp comes alive, not with excitement, but with dependable routine. As sunlight filters through the palm trees and the last raindrops disappear into the warm earth, you realize that resilience is often as steady as the tide itself, returning quietly each morning, asking only that ordinary people continue their work with patience, care, and hope. The Red Ball Express, through the night. The convoy that rarely stopped it is September 1944. The Allied armies have broken out of Normandy and are advancing rapidly across France. Their success depends not only on soldiers at the front, but on an immense supply system stretching hundreds of kilometers behind them. Tonight, your place is behind the wheel of a cargo truck on the Red Ball Express, the round-the-clock convoy network created to carry fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and spare parts toward the advancing armies. As dusk settles over the French countryside, you perform the same inspection that begins every journey. The engine oil is checked first, followed by coolant, tire pressure, lights, and brakes. A loose strap securing cargo is tightened. The fuel tank is topped off. These small routines rarely appear in history books, yet every successful delivery begins long before the truck starts moving. The convoy assembles quietly beside a temporary supply depot. Most of the drivers are members of segregated African-American transportation companies whose extraordinary contribution kept the Allied advance moving across France. They exchange brief greetings before climbing into their vehicles. There is little need for long conversations. Everyone understands the night's assignment. The engine comes to life with a familiar diesel rumble. One by one, trucks roll onto roads marked with the distinctive red ball signs that give the route its name. Traffic flows in a single direction whenever possible, reducing delays and keeping supplies moving almost continuously through the night. Inside the cab, the rhythm soon becomes familiar. Headlights are carefully controlled, and each driver maintains a safe distance from the truck ahead. The road passes beneath the wheels in a steady procession of villages, open fields, and roadside trees. Occasionally, military police direct traffic at busy intersections, ensuring the convoy never loses its momentum. Behind you, the cargo shifts gently with each turn. Somewhere farther east, soldiers waiting for fuel, warm food, replacement tires, or medical supplies depend upon these deliveries arriving before sunrise. As another mile quietly disappears beneath your tires, you begin to wonder whether history is sometimes carried forward not by the people at the front of the column, but by those who patiently keep it moving from behind. Miles measured by headlights. The night deepens as your truck settles into a comfortable rhythm. The gentle vibration of the engine travels through the steering wheel, while the soft hum of tires against the pavement becomes almost hypnotic. Ahead, a line of dimly lit trucks stretches into the darkness, each carrying something that another unit cannot do without. The Red Ball Express never truly sleeps. Drivers work in shifts, pausing only when absolutely necessary. Fuel tankers, refrigerated trucks, ammunition carriers, and maintenance vehicles all share the same carefully organized routes. Military police stand at key intersections, directing the endless stream of traffic with lanterns whose light is visible only at close range. You glance at the dashboard gauges every few minutes. Engine temperature remains steady. Oil pressure is normal. A quick look in the mirrors confirms the cargo is still secure. These small checks become second nature after hours on the road. A mechanical failure in the wrong place could delay dozens of vehicles behind you, so prevention is always better than repair. Eventually, the convoy reaches a scheduled rest area. Engines idle quietly, while drivers stretch stiff legs and refill canteens. Mechanics move from truck to truck carrying toolboxes and flashlights with shaded lenses. Tire pressures are checked again. Loose fan belts are tightened. Windshields are wiped clean of dust and insects. A field kitchen serves hot coffee and simple sandwiches before the journey continues. Most conversations revolve around practical matters, road conditions ahead, bridge repairs, fuel consumption, and weather forecasts. There is comfort in these ordinary discussions. They remind everyone that successful logistics depend upon planning, cooperation, and patience more than speed alone. Back on the road, the convoy rolls forward once more beneath a sky filled with quiet stars. Farms and villages pass silently beyond the windows, their lights dimmed by wartime restrictions. Somewhere in the distance, railway workers unload freight trains while warehouse crews prepare tomorrow's shipments, extending the supply chain far beyond the roads themselves. As the miles gradually disappear behind you, you begin to wonder whether the true measure of endurance is not how quickly one travels, but how faithfully one continues the journey, mile after quiet mile. Delivering the dawn. A pale ribbon of light slowly appears along the eastern horizon. After hours behind the wheel, the darkness begins to retreat from the French countryside. Villages emerge from the morning mist. Church steeples become visible above the trees, and the long line of trucks ahead takes on clearer shape with every passing minute. You guide the truck into a forward supply depot where movement has already begun. Forklifts are uncommon here, so most of the unloading is done by hand. Teams of soldiers form orderly lines passing fuel cans, wooden crates of ammunition, food rations, medical chests, spare tires, engine parts, and radio equipment from one pair of hands to the next. Every crate is checked against a manifest before being sent onward to the units that have been waiting through the night. Nearby, quartermasters compare inventories with meticulous care. They know precisely how much fuel has arrived, how much remains, and where every shipment must travel next. A misplaced crate or delayed delivery could affect dozens of units many kilometers farther forward. Logistics is built upon accuracy as much as movement. Your truck, now empty, receives its own morning inspection before the return journey. A mechanic crawls beneath the chassis to examine the suspension after another demanding night on the road. The engine oil is checked once again. Tire treads are inspected for damage caused by rough roads and scattered debris. A windshield clouded by insects is washed clean with a bucket of water drawn from a nearby trailer. The depot itself hums with quiet purpose. Clerks update ledgers. Signal personnel relay transport schedules by radio. Cooks prepare breakfast for drivers arriving from every direction. Some men roll out blankets beneath their trucks for a short rest before heading back west, while others climb immediately into freshly loaded vehicles bound for another overnight run. The Red Ball Express operated day and night because armies consumed astonishing quantities of supplies. A single advancing division required fuel for tanks and trucks, food for thousands of soldiers, medical equipment, replacement clothing, engineering materials, and countless spare parts every single day. Behind every headline describing the liberation of towns across France stood thousands of drivers whose names rarely appeared in newspapers but whose work made continued progress possible. As you finish your cup of hot coffee, the morning sun rises above the depot, warming the metal hood of your truck. There is little time to admire the view. Another load has already been assigned. Soon the engine will start again, and the familiar road will lead back toward the great warehouses of Normandy before returning east once more. You climb into the driver's seat, adjust your gloves, and place both hands on the wheel. Around you, dozens of engines come to life, one after another, creating a low, steady chorus that drifts across the awakening countryside. It is not the sound of celebration, it is the sound of persistence. And perhaps that is the quiet legacy of the Red Ball Express, not simply that it carried supplies across France, but that ordinary drivers, mechanics, cooks, dispatchers, and clerks repeated the same careful routines day after day, proving that history often advances at the speed of a well-maintained truck and a determined person willing to keep driving until dawn. Radar operators, watching the empty sky, the green glow before midnight. It is 1940, along the southern coast of Britain. The wind rolls steadily in from the English Channel, bending the grass around a line of tall steel towers that rise against the evening sky. These are part of the Chain-Home radar network, one of the most significant early warning systems of the Second World War. To passing travelers, they appear quiet and almost ordinary, but inside the nearby operations room, every hour demands careful attention. You begin your evening watch just as daylight fades. The room is deliberately dim, allowing every operator to read the soft green light of cathode ray displays without distraction. Large wall maps cover one side of the room. Wooden plotting tables stand ready beneath them, while telephones connect the station to neighboring radar sites and fighter command headquarters. Your seat is simple, a wooden chair worn smooth by countless previous shifts. Before taking over, you receive a brief handover from the operator finishing his watch. Equipment readings are normal. Communication lines remain clear. The weather over the channel is calm, with scattered cloud expected later in the night. These details are entered neatly into the station log before the previous watch quietly departs. The radar equipment itself requires constant care. Vacuum tubes generate considerable heat, so engineers regularly inspect cooling systems and electrical connections. Nearby, technicians adjust delicate controls with steady hands, ensuring the equipment remains properly calibrated. Even a minor fault could produce misleading echoes or obscure genuine aircraft movements. For long stretches, nothing changes. The display sweeps rhythmically across the screen, tracing the same graceful motion again and again. Most returns belong to familiar landmarks, weather patterns, or friendly aircraft whose positions are already known. The greatest challenge is not excitement, but concentration. Fatigue can be as dangerous as faulty machinery. A kettle whistles softly in the adjoining room. Fresh tea is poured into enamel mugs while one operator quietly sharpens a pencil before returning to his notes. Every routine is small, almost invisible, yet together they sustain the long hours of uninterrupted observation. Outside, darkness settles completely over the coastline. Inside, the radar beam continues its endless sweep across the night sky, searching patiently beyond the horizon. Watching the gentle pulse of the glowing screen, you begin to wonder whether history is sometimes shaped most profoundly during the countless quiet hours when nothing appears to happen at all. Quiet signals across the channel. The hours after midnight pass with remarkable steadiness. The operations room settles into a comforting routine, interrupted only by the gentle click of switches, the scratching of pencils across logbooks, and the occasional ring of a field telephone. Outside, the towering aerials of the Chain-Home station stand motionless against the night sky, sending radio waves across the English Channel and patiently waiting for their echoes to return. You lean forward as the familiar green trace sweeps across the cathode ray display once more. Most of the marks are expected. Weather fronts drifting over the sea create broad, gentle patterns. Friendly aircraft appear exactly where the plotting table predicts they should. Every contact is compared carefully with reports arriving from neighboring radar stations, ensuring that information remains accurate before it is passed along. Beside you, a plotter moves small wooden markers across a large map, updating aircraft positions with measured precision. Another operator notes the exact time beside each report. These quiet actions, repeated hundreds of times throughout the night, allow commanders many miles away to build an ever-changing picture of the skies above southern Britain. Behind the scenes, engineers continue their own patient work. They inspect power supplies, replace aging vacuum tubes before they fail, and monitor generators that keep the station operating even if the main electrical supply is interrupted. A reliable radar station depends as much upon careful maintenance as upon the technology itself. During a short break, you step outside into the cool coastal air. The sea is almost invisible beneath the moonlight, though you can hear waves rolling gently against the shoreline below the cliffs. The great steel towers rise silently overhead, their purpose hidden from anyone passing in the darkness. They neither celebrate victories nor mourn losses. They simply continue transmitting, hour after hour. Returning to your station, you take another sip of tea and resume the watch. The screen glows softly in the dim room, its steady rhythm almost hypnotic. Concentration, patience, and consistency remain your most valuable tools. As another sweep crosses the display without urgency or surprise, you begin to wonder whether the strongest defenses are sometimes built not from walls or weapons, but from people willing to remain quietly attentive while the rest of the world sleeps. The first sweep of morning. Long before the sun appears above the English Channel, the operations room begins to change almost imperceptibly. The deep darkness outside softens into shades of grey, and a faint glow slips through the blackout curtains around the edges of the windows. Inside, however, very little is different. The radar continues its steady pulse, the telephones remain within easy reach, and the plotting table slowly fills with another night's careful record. Your shift is nearing its end. Before leaving your station, you review the logbook one final time. Every equipment check, weather observation, maintenance note, and radar contact has been recorded in neat handwriting. There are no dramatic entries, no hurried corrections, only the quiet evidence of disciplined work carried out exactly as intended. The morning watch arrives carrying fresh mugs of tea and notebooks tucked beneath their arms. The handover is brief but thorough. You explain the condition of the equipment, mention a vacuum tube replaced during the night, report the weather moving in from the channel, and point out the routine calibration completed a few hours earlier. In radar work, clear communication is just as important as the machinery itself. Outside, technicians begin another inspection of the towering aerials. Salt carried inland by the sea can slowly corrode exposed metal, while strong coastal winds loosen fittings over time. Every bolt, cable, and insulator is examined regularly. The remarkable reliability of the chain-home network depends not only upon scientific innovation, but also upon countless hours of maintenance performed by engineers whose names seldom appear in history books. As daylight spreads across the coastline, seabirds circle above the cliffs, and fishing boats cautiously leave nearby harbours. To them, the radar station is simply another familiar landmark standing quietly above the sea. Few would ever witness the patient work unfolding inside its buildings through the long hours of every night. The history of the Second World War often celebrates pilots climbing into their aircraft or commanders making difficult decisions. Yet those moments depended upon information gathered long beforehand by operators who watched glowing screens, plotted tiny markers across maps, answered telephones, and trusted routine more than excitement. You remove your headphones and stretch tired shoulders before stepping outside. The morning breeze carries the scent of salt water and damp grass. Behind you, another team has already taken their places, continuing the endless cycle of observation that never truly ends. Looking back at the silent towers one last time, you realize they have spent the entire night doing exactly what they were built to do, quietly watching the horizon without asking for recognition. And perhaps that is one of history's gentlest lessons. The people who change the course of events are not always those standing in the spotlight. Sometimes they are the patient observers who, through countless ordinary hours of careful attention, help others greet the dawn in safety. Engineers repairing bridges before sunrise, where the river never sleeps. It is the autumn of 1944, somewhere in northwestern Europe. A narrow river winds quietly through farmland, reflecting the last traces of evening light. The water seems indifferent to the war unfolding along its banks. It continues its slow journey toward the sea, just as it did before soldiers arrived and just as it will after they have gone. You arrive with a company of combat engineers shortly after sunset. Earlier in the day, the bridge spanning the river was badly damaged. Without it, fuel trucks, ambulances, artillery tractors, and supply convoys must halt at the riverbank. Before dawn, a crossing must be restored, not for glory, but because thousands of people farther ahead depend upon the steady movement of men and supplies. The first task is careful inspection. Lanterns fitted with blackout shades cast narrow circles of light across broken timbers and twisted steel. An engineering officer studies the bridge from both banks, while surveyors measure the width, current, and depth of the river. Every decision begins with accurate observation. Nearby, trucks quietly unload timber beams, steel panels, rope, cables, hand tools, and portable generators. Each piece is stacked in precise order so that no time is wasted searching for equipment later in the night. Drivers reverse slowly into position under the guidance of signalmen using covered flashlights instead of shouted instructions. You shoulder a heavy timber plank alongside 3 other engineers. The weight is considerable, but no one rushes. A misplaced beam or poorly secured joint could endanger every vehicle that will eventually cross the bridge. In engineering, patience is often the fastest path to success. The air smells of damp earth, fresh-cut wood, cold river water, and machine oil drifting from the parked trucks. Somewhere downstream, ducks disturb the quiet surface before settling once again into the darkness. Above, the first stars begin to appear between slowly moving clouds. The river offers no opinion about uniforms or national flags. It simply asks whether those who cross it have built their bridge well enough. And as you place the first timber into position, you begin to wonder whether the strongest foundations in history are often laid in silence long before anyone notices they exist. Chapter 2. Building in the darkness. The river continues its steady flow beneath the half-finished crossing. Its gentle current carries fallen leaves downstream, slipping quietly between the temporary supports that now stretch from one bank toward the other. Around you, the engineers work with measured precision, each person understanding their task without the need for raised voices. The portable generator hums softly, providing power to a few carefully shielded work lamps. Their muted glow reflects off wet timber and steel, just bright enough to guide careful hands without drawing unnecessary attention across the countryside. Shadows move slowly as carpenters measure planks, welders inspect metal fittings, and crane operators lower heavy bridge sections into place. Every connection is checked twice. Bolts are tightened with long-handled wrenches until they reach the required tension. Wooden decking is aligned so that the weight of loaded trucks will be distributed evenly across the structure. Engineers pause frequently to compare their work with detailed bridge plans carried inside waterproof map cases. Accuracy is never sacrificed for speed. Nearby, another team assembles a section of a Bailey Bridge, one of the most versatile military bridges of the war. The prefabricated steel panels fit together like a carefully designed puzzle, allowing damaged crossings to be replaced far more quickly than traditional construction methods. Yet even this remarkable system depends upon disciplined teamwork. Every panel, pin, and roller must be placed exactly where it belongs. The riverbank has become a quiet community of specialists. Drivers wait patiently beside loaded trucks. Signalmen relay progress reports to headquarters by field telephone. Mechanics inspect cranes and compressors between lifts, ensuring every machine remains dependable through the night. A field kitchen appears with steaming tea poured into enamel mugs, offering warmth during a brief pause before work resumes. Hours pass almost unnoticed. The bridge gradually extends farther across the water, one careful section at a time. There is no dramatic announcement marking each success, only the quiet satisfaction of another beam secured, another joint completed, another step toward restoring the road. As you wipe damp sawdust from your gloves and prepare to fit the next steel panel, you begin to wonder whether the greatest achievements are sometimes built not through extraordinary moments, but through hundreds of ordinary tasks completed with unwavering patience. Chapter 3. Before the first truck crossed. A faint ribbon of pale blue appears above the eastern horizon. The darkness that has sheltered the engineers throughout the night slowly gives way to the quiet light of early morning. Around the bridge, the final stages of construction begin with the same careful rhythm that has guided every hour since sunset. You walk the length of the new crossing beside the senior engineer. Every plank is inspected underfoot. Steel joints are examined one last time. Locking pins are checked to ensure they are fully seated. Beneath the bridge, the river continues its patient journey, flowing around the fresh supports as though nothing remarkable has happened during the night. A loaded truck waits on the riverbank, its engine idling softly in the cool morning air. Before it moves, the bridge must be tested. Engineers roll a lighter vehicle across first, watching closely for any unusual movement in the decking or support panels. Everything remains steady. The bridge responds exactly as it was designed to. Only then does the first supply truck begin its slow crossing. The driver keeps a constant speed while the engineers observe from both banks. The wooden deck creaks gently beneath the weight, but the steel framework remains firm. One truck becomes two, then three. Soon, a steady procession of fuel tankers, ambulances, artillery tractors, and ration lorries begins flowing toward the front, each vehicle continuing a journey that had paused only hours earlier. The engineering company gathers its tools with quiet satisfaction. Wrenches are cleaned before returning to their boxes. Coils of rope are neatly wound. Unused bridge panels are loaded back onto transport trucks for the next assignment. Experience has taught everyone that another damaged crossing will almost certainly need rebuilding before long. The Bailey Bridge, first introduced by British engineer Sir Donald Bailey, became one of the most important engineering achievements of the Second World War. Strong enough to carry heavy military vehicles and simple enough to assemble without specialized machinery, it allowed armies to maintain momentum across rivers and destroyed infrastructure throughout Europe and beyond. Yet its true strength rested in the ordinary engineers who worked patiently through cold nights, trusting measurements, teamwork, and craftsmanship. As the sun rises above the fields, the bridge is already becoming an ordinary part of the landscape. Drivers cross without stopping. Messengers carry dispatches to waiting headquarters. Medical vehicles continue toward field hospitals. Within hours, few travelers will know that the crossing did not exist the previous evening. You pause for a final look at the river before climbing into the back of a truck, bound for the next assignment. Behind you, the bridge quietly fulfills its purpose, asking for no applause and demanding no recognition. It simply carries people safely from one bank to the other. Perhaps that is how much of history is truly built, not through monuments or ceremonies, but through careful hands working in darkness, finishing their task before dawn so that countless strangers may continue their journey without ever knowing who made it possible. Arctic convoys and the endless polar night. The watch begins in frozen seas. It is the winter of 1943, somewhere between northern Scotland and the Soviet ports of Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. You stand aboard a merchant ship in an Allied Arctic convoy, surrounded by an ocean the color of polished steel. The daylight is brief, the air painfully cold, and the horizon seems to merge with the sea beneath a ceiling of low grey clouds. Your watch begins as another quietly ends. A sailor hands over the bridge log, noting the ship's course, wind direction, visibility, and the steady formation of the convoy. The exchange is calm and methodical. On these voyages, routine is one of the crew's greatest safeguards. The deck is coated with a thin layer of ice. Before anything else, you join several crewmates carrying wooden mallets and shovels. Together, you chip away the frozen build-up along the railings and around the lifeboat davits. Left unattended, the accumulating ice can make a ship dangerously top-heavy. Every careful strike of the mallet helps preserve the vessel's balance in the restless Arctic Sea. Below deck, engineers inspect the steam engines with practiced attention. Pressure gauges are checked, lubrication points are serviced. Warm pipes hiss softly as they carry steam through the engine room, offering one of the few places aboard where fingers can briefly recover from the bitter cold. Nearby, the radio officer listens for convoy signals while the navigator quietly marks the ship's position on a chart spread across a worn wooden table. Meals are simple but deeply appreciated. Thick soup, bread, and hot tea provide warmth that lingers long after the mugs have been emptied. Around the mess table, conversations remain gentle. Someone mentions home. Another quietly repairs a wool glove whose stitching has begun to loosen after weeks at sea. Outside, the convoy continues its patient progress through the freezing darkness. Escort ships maintain their stations while merchant vessels hold careful intervals, each captain trusting the discipline of every other crew on the icy water. Looking across the cold expanse where sea and sky seem almost indistinguishable, you begin to wonder whether endurance is measured not by the distance traveled, but by the quiet determination to keep sailing through another long Arctic night. Chapter 2: the sound of ice against the hull. The middle hours of the watch arrive almost unnoticed. There is no sunrise to mark the passage of time, only the steady turning of the ship's engines and the quiet discipline of the crew. Around you, the convoy presses onward through the Arctic Ocean, each vessel maintaining its assigned position despite the darkness and the cold. You pull your heavy wool collar higher as a sharp wind sweeps across the deck. Fine spray freezes almost as soon as it lands, leaving another thin layer of ice along the handrails and hatch covers. Once again, sailors emerge with wooden mallets, carefully breaking away the new accumulation. It is demanding work, repeated several times a day whenever conditions require. The sea never stops building ice, so the crew never stops removing it. Inside the wheelhouse, the helmsman keeps the compass course with small, deliberate movements of the wheel. Beside him, the officer of the watch studies the convoy through binoculars whenever visibility allows, checking that the dim silhouettes of neighboring ships remain in their proper places. Navigation in these northern waters depends upon constant attention, where fog, snow, and long winter nights can quickly obscure even nearby vessels. Below deck, the engine room offers a welcome contrast to the freezing air above. The steady pulse of the steam engines fills the compartment with a comforting rhythm. Engineers monitor boilers, inspect valves, and record temperatures and pressures in neat logbooks. Every reading is compared with the previous one. Small changes are noticed early, long before they become larger problems. In the galley, the cook prepares another pot of tea while fresh bread warms in the oven. The familiar aroma drifts through narrow passageways, briefly replacing the scent of fuel oil and salt water. A short meal becomes more than nourishment. It is a reminder that ordinary routines still exist, even in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Desert mechanics, under North African stars. Sand in every gear. I'd be happy to continue. It's the autumn of 1942, somewhere in the North African desert. The heat of the day has finally begun to fade, leaving behind a cool breeze that moves gently across the endless expanse of sand and stone. Above you, the night sky is astonishingly clear. Thousands of stars stretch from one horizon to the other, undimmed by city lights or drifting clouds. Your shift begins only after most combat vehicles have returned from the day's operations. While many soldiers prepare for a few hours of sleep, the maintenance area slowly comes to life. Trucks, armored vehicles, and utility transports arrive one by one, each carrying the fine desert dust that has settled into every hinge, bearing, and engine compartment. The first task is always cleaning. With soft brushes and compressed air, you remove sand from air filters before it can work deeper into the engines. In North Africa, dust is a relentless companion. Left unchecked, it can wear down pistons, clog radiators, and shorten the life of even the most dependable machine. Every careful movement of the brush is an investment in tomorrow's journey. Nearby, another mechanic drains a small sample of engine oil into a metal tray, searching for signs of contamination. Across the workshop, a fitter checks suspension springs strained by hundreds of kilometers across rough desert tracks. Drivers quietly report unusual noises, stiff steering, or engines that seem to run hotter than usual during the afternoon's march. The air carries familiar scents of warm metal, grease, diesel fuel, and dry canvas. Occasionally, a kettle whistles atop a portable stove, and enamel mugs of tea pass from one mechanic to another. Conversation remains calm and practical. Most discussions concern replacement parts, tire wear, fuel consumption, or tomorrow's expected route across the desert. Beyond the maintenance area, the vast silence of the Sahara remains almost untouched. A faint breeze reshapes the surface of nearby dunes, slowly erasing the tracks left only hours before. The landscape seems determined to remind every traveler that nothing here remains exactly as it was. As you tighten another bolt beneath the glow of a shaded work lamp, you begin to wonder whether survival in the desert depends not upon conquering the landscape, but upon respecting its quiet, patient persistence. The long night of maintenance. The desert grows noticeably cooler after midnight. The warmth stored in the sand throughout the day slowly escapes into the clear sky. and a light jacket becomes just as necessary as it seemed impossible only a few hours earlier. Above the workshop, countless stars shine with remarkable clarity, providing a quiet backdrop to another night's work. You return to the vehicle parked beneath a canvas awning. The engine has cooled enough for a thorough inspection. Carefully lifting the bonnet, you examine hoses, fan belts, coolant levels, and electrical connections. Fine grains of sand have found their way into the smallest corners, despite every effort to keep them out. A soft brush and clean cloth become some of the most valuable tools in the workshop. Nearby, another mechanic removes a wheel to inspect the brake assembly after a long journey across rocky ground. Tire pressures are measured once again because desert temperatures can cause noticeable changes between the heat of afternoon and the coolness of night. Fuel filters are cleaned, radiators are checked for leaks, and grease is applied to suspension joints that have endured another day of constant vibration. The maintenance area works with quiet efficiency. Portable generators provide a gentle hum, while shielded lamps cast warm circles of light onto open toolboxes. Every wrench is returned to its proper place after use. Spare parts are counted before being stored inside wooden crates to protect them from drifting sand. These small habits save valuable time when the next repair becomes necessary. A field kitchen nearby serves another round of hot tea, accompanied by hard biscuits and preserved meat. The brief pause offers warmth rather than rest. Conversations remain focused on practical matters, weather forecasts, water supplies, and tomorrow's planned route across the desert tracks. Experience has taught everyone that preparation is often the difference between an ordinary journey and a difficult one. Beyond the workshop, the Sahara remains silent beneath its blanket of stars. The wind gently reshapes the dunes, erasing old tire tracks, while creating new patterns that will greet tomorrow's travelers. As you close the engine compartment and wipe the last traces of dust from your hands, you begin to wonder whether the desert's greatest lesson is patience, the quiet understanding that every successful journey begins long before the first engine is started. Before the desert wakes. The eastern horizon slowly changes from deep indigo to pale gold. Dawn arrives gently across the North African desert, revealing a landscape that appears almost unchanged despite another long night of careful work. The dunes glow softly in the early light, while the cool air carries the faint scent of dry earth and engine oil. Your shift is drawing to a close, but one final inspection remains. Together with another mechanic, you walk slowly along the line of vehicles parked on firm desert ground. Each engine compartment is closed and secured. Fuel tanks have been topped off during the night. Radiators are checked one last time, and tire pressures are confirmed before the day's heat begins to expand the air inside them. Drivers arrive quietly from their tents, carrying enamel mugs filled with strong tea. They greet the mechanics with tired smiles and begin their own routine inspections. A vehicle is never accepted without a careful walk-around. Headlamps are cleaned of dust, spare fuel cans are secured, and canvas covers are tightened against the wind that will inevitably carry more sand before the day is over. Nearby, the recovery crew prepares its equipment in case a truck or armored vehicle becomes stranded far from camp. Tow cables are coiled neatly, spare tires are loaded, water containers are counted with particular care, because in the desert, water is as essential as fuel. Quartermasters record every litre issued, knowing that careful planning keeps both people and machines moving across immense distances. The workshop itself gradually falls quiet. Toolboxes are closed. Portable lamps are extinguished as sunlight replaces them. Mechanics wash grease from their hands using precious water sparingly, aware that every drop has travelled a long way to reach this isolated camp. During the North African campaign, countless hours were spent not in battle but in maintenance. Sand infiltrated engines, rough terrain wore down suspensions, and extreme temperatures challenged every vehicle. Success depended not only upon skilled drivers, but also upon mechanics whose patient work each night allowed convoys, ambulances, and armored formations to continue their journeys the following morning. As the first vehicles pull away, leaving fresh tracks across the open desert, you remain standing beside the now quiet workshop. Within hours, the wind will begin softening those tracks, and by tomorrow, many will have disappeared completely. Yet the work completed during the night will continue long after the marks in the sand are gone. Engines will run smoothly because filters were cleaned. Tires will endure because pressures were checked. Journeys will reach their destinations because someone spent the night tightening bolts beneath a shaded lamp while the rest of the camp slept. Perhaps that is the desert's quiet wisdom. The wind may erase footprints, and the sun may fade yesterday's trails, but careful work is never truly lost. It travels onward in every reliable engine, every safe arrival, and every new dawn that begins with people ready to continue the journey. Waiting at the bomber airfield before dawn, the quiet hours before takeoff. It is the spring of 1944 at a Royal Air Force bomber station in eastern England. The afternoon has long since faded into evening, and a cool mist settles gently over the wide grass airfield. Rows of heavy bombers stand quietly on their dispersal points, their dark silhouettes almost blending into the night. From a distance, the station seems asleep. Up close, it is quietly preparing for another long mission. You begin your shift walking along the perimeter track, where ground crews have already gathered around the aircraft assigned to fly before dawn. Toolboxes sit neatly beside ladders, and shaded work lamps cast small pools of amber light across aluminum wings. The smell of aviation fuel mingles with damp grass, warm engine oil, and freshly brewed tea drifting from a nearby maintenance hut. The first task is inspection. A mechanic carefully examines each propeller blade for even the smallest nick that might create dangerous vibration during flight. Another checks hydraulic lines beneath the landing gear, while an electrician tests navigation lights and cockpit instruments. Nearby, armourers methodically prepare the aircraft according to the mission plan, confirming every fitting and safety mechanism before closing the bomb bay doors. Inside the operations building, navigators quietly spread maps across long wooden tables. Using rulers, pencils, and protractors, they calculate headings, distances, and estimated times over carefully selected landmarks. Beside them, meteorologists study weather charts arriving from stations across Britain and the North Sea, searching for cloud layers, wind speeds, and visibility that could shape the coming flight. The station clock continues its patient march through the evening. A cook in the mess hall prepares hot meals for crews who will be awake long before sunrise. Clerks update paperwork. Telephone operators relay routine messages between headquarters and the airfield. Every role fits into a larger rhythm that has been repeated countless times before. Outside, once again, you pause beside one of the waiting aircraft. Its engines are silent, its cockpit dark, and its wings glisten with tiny drops of dew beneath the night sky. In only a few hours, this quiet machine will carry its crew into the darkness above Europe. For now, however, it simply waits. Standing beneath the broad wing as the stars slowly brighten overhead, you begin to wonder whether the longest journey always begins with movement, or with the quiet patience of those preparing carefully while the world around them sleeps. Maps, engines, and midnight tea. Midnight arrives quietly across the airfield. A thin veil of mist drifts over the grass, softening the outlines of hangars and parked aircraft. The station remains busy, though every movement is measured and unhurried. There is a shared understanding that careful preparation during these hours is as important as anything that will happen after takeoff. You climb a maintenance platform beside one of the bombers, running a gloved hand along the smooth leading edge of its wing. Tiny beads of moisture have gathered in the cool night air. A mechanic wipes them away while another checks the control surfaces, gently moving the ailerons and elevators through their full range of motion to ensure nothing binds or catches. Beneath the aircraft, fitters inspect the landing gear one final time. Hydraulic reservoirs are topped up where necessary, tires are examined for cuts or uneven wear, and brake lines are checked under the glow of hooded lamps. Nearby, an engine specialist slowly rotates a propeller by hand before beginning another inspection of the powerful piston engines that will soon carry the aircraft into the sky. Inside the operations room, navigators continue refining their route. New weather reports have arrived, and wind speeds at different altitudes are carefully added to the flight calculations. Wireless operators test radio frequencies, while intelligence officers quietly review recognition signals and emergency procedures. The atmosphere is calm, almost scholarly, with pencils scratching across charts more often than voices filling the room. The station kitchen becomes one of the warmest places on the base. Large kettles steam gently as cooks prepare tea and simple meals for air crews and ground staff alike. Fresh bread, porridge, and eggs are served without ceremony. These familiar routines provide a sense of normality before a demanding day begins. Outside, the bomber still waits beneath the stars. Around it, dozens of specialists complete the final details that few people will ever notice. Every inspection signed, every fuel cap secured, every instrument tested contributes quietly to the safety of the crew. As you close another maintenance panel and hear the distant ticking of the station clock, you begin to wonder whether history is sometimes written not only by those who fly into the sky, but also by those who patiently prepare every detail before the engines ever begin to turn. The sound of engines at dawn. A faint silver light begins to gather along the eastern horizon, though the stars still linger above the airfield. The long night of preparation is nearly complete. Around you, the quiet concentration of the station gradually shifts into the measured rhythm of departure. The first air crews leave the briefing room carrying maps folded neatly into flight cases. Navigators review their routes one final time beneath shaded lamps. Flight engineers exchange a few calm words with the mechanics who have spent the entire night caring for the aircraft. These conversations are brief, built on mutual trust rather than lengthy explanations. You walk once more around the bomber, completing the final inspection. Fuel caps are secured, access panels are locked, control locks have been removed, and the tires rest firmly on the dew-covered grass. Satisfied, the chief mechanic signs the maintenance form before handing it quietly to the pilot. It is a simple exchange of paper, yet it represents countless careful hours of work performed while most of the world slept. The engines are started one by one. Each piston engine coughs gently before settling into a deep, steady rhythm. Warm exhaust drifts across the dispersal area, carrying the familiar scent of aviation fuel and engine oil through the cool morning air. Ground crew members watch attentively, listening for any unusual vibration or change in engine tone. Years of experience have taught them to recognize problems long before instruments reveal them. Soon, the aircraft begin taxiing slowly toward the perimeter track. Marshals guide them with illuminated signal wands, ensuring safe spacing between the bombers as they move across the wide grass airfield. In the control tower, wireless operators maintain calm communication, while meteorological officers provide one final weather update before departure. As the first bomber accelerates along the runway, its engines grow louder before gradually fading into the morning sky. Another follows, then another, until the once crowded dispersal points begin to empty. The airfield that seemed so still only an hour earlier has quietly fulfilled its purpose. For the ground crews, however, the work is not finished. Toolboxes are collected and returned to the workshops. Spare parts are inventoried. Fuel bowsers are prepared for the aircraft that will eventually return. Mechanics complete detailed maintenance records describing every inspection carried out during the night. Even after the bombers have disappeared beyond the horizon, the routines that sustain the station continue without interruption. Throughout the war, thousands of mechanics, armourers, meteorologists, cooks, clerks, radio operators, and engineers served on bomber stations across Britain. Their contributions rarely appeared in photographs or newspaper headlines, yet every successful mission depended upon their quiet professionalism. The airfield itself functioned like a finely tuned machine, where each ordinary task supported every extraordinary journey. The sun finally rises above the hangars, its golden light spreading across the now quiet runway. Dew sparkles on the grass where aircraft stood only moments before. The station seems almost peaceful again, preparing for another day of maintenance, planning, and patient waiting until evening returns. You remove your gloves and take one last look across the empty dispersal area. The silence feels familiar now, not empty, but earned. It is the silence that follows careful preparation, shared responsibility, and a night spent ensuring that others could greet the morning from the sky. Perhaps that is one of the gentlest truths of wartime history. Before every aircraft climbs into the clouds, countless unseen hands have already completed their own quiet journey. One bolt, one map, one cup of tea, and one sleepless night at a time. Medics holding the night in Italy. The canvas hospital beneath the hills. It is the winter of 1944 during the Italian campaign. Evening settles slowly over a valley bordered by low mountains, where olive groves and stone farmhouses stand quietly beneath a sky turning deep blue. A few kilometers behind the front lines, a cluster of canvas tents forms a field hospital. Here, the sounds of the battlefield arrive softened by distance, while the work of preserving life continues through every hour of the night. You begin your shift by fastening the buttons of a heavy wool coat before stepping into the largest medical tent. The air is warmer inside, carrying the familiar scents of soap, antiseptic, damp canvas, and fresh coffee brewing on a small iron stove. Hurricane lamps hang from wooden poles, casting a gentle amber glow across neatly arranged cots, folded blankets, and shelves lined with carefully labeled medical supplies. Before the evening grows busy, every station is inspected. Sterile instruments are counted and arranged in precise order. Bottles of disinfectant are checked and refilled where necessary. Fresh bandages are folded into tidy stacks, while enamel basins are filled with hot water heated only moments before. Nothing is left to chance. Order brings calm, and calm allows every member of the medical team to work with quiet confidence. A clerk opens the admission ledger and prepares a clean page for the night's entries. Nearby, another medic carefully checks the hospital's limited stock of blankets, knowing that warmth can be just as important as medicine during the cold Italian winter. Outside, drivers inspect ambulances parked beneath camouflage nets, ensuring engines will start quickly if another journey becomes necessary before dawn. For a few peaceful moments, the hospital settles into a gentle rhythm. A nurse adjusts a pillow beneath a tired patient's head. Another quietly pours tea into metal mugs for the night staff. The doctor reviews handwritten notes beneath the glow of a shaded lamp while a radio operator listens patiently for routine messages from nearby aid stations. The work here is measured not by haste, but by steady attention. Every blanket straightened, every instrument cleaned, and every careful note written in the ledger contributes to the quiet purpose of the hospital. As the wind brushes softly against the canvas walls and another calm night begins, you find yourself wondering whether healing is sometimes carried not only by medicine, but by the reassuring comfort of familiar routines performed with kindness. The lanterns remain. Lit midnight arrives quietly over the Italian countryside. Beyond the canvas walls, a cool breeze moves through the olive trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth after an evening shower. Inside the field hospital, the lanterns continue to burn with a steady amber light, illuminating another peaceful cycle of careful work. You begin by checking the iron stove, adding a few small pieces of dry wood to maintain a gentle warmth throughout the tent. Nearby, a nurse folds freshly laundered blankets, while another replenishes shelves with neatly rolled bandages and sterilized dressings. Every item has its place. In the dim light, familiarity is as valuable as visibility. The hospital functions through quiet cooperation. A pharmacist carefully counts bottles of medicine before recording the remaining supplies in a ledger. Medical orderlies boil water for washing instruments and preparing hot drinks. Outside, ambulance drivers inspect tires, fuel levels, and engine coolant before returning to a sheltered bench for a brief cup of coffee. They know another journey may come before sunrise, and preparation leaves little to chance. The admission desk remains calm. A clerk updates patient records with slow, deliberate handwriting, noting temperatures, treatments, and observations made throughout the evening. These pages may seem ordinary, yet together they preserve the story of the hospital's tireless work far from public attention. During a short pause, the staff gather around a kettle of tea. Conversation drifts towards simple things, the weather in the valley, letters recently received from home, and the hope that tomorrow's roads will remain passable after the rain. The quiet exchange offers a welcome reminder that ordinary life still exists beyond the routines of war. Outside, engineers continue maintaining nearby roads and bridges so ambulances can travel safely through the hills. Signal crews inspect telephone lines linking aid stations with field hospitals. ensuring that requests for transport and medical supplies continue flowing without interruption. Even healing depends upon an unseen network of careful planning. As another lantern is trimmed and another page is completed in the hospital ledger, you begin to wonder whether compassion grows strongest, not during extraordinary moments, but through countless small acts of care repeated faithfully throughout the longest nights. Morning light. Across the canvas. Before the sun reaches the valley, the darkness begins to soften around the edges of the canvas tents. The lanterns that guided the night's work burn a little less brightly as pale morning light filters through the fabric overhead. Another shift is quietly coming to an end. You walk slowly through the rows of neatly arranged cots, pausing to straighten a blanket here, adjust a pillow there, and check that fresh water has been placed within easy reach. The field hospital awakens gently. A kettle whistles on the iron stove, and the familiar aroma of coffee mixes with the clean scent of soap and antiseptic that has filled the tent throughout the night. Outside, the camp is already stirring. Ambulance drivers wipe dew from their windscreens before inspecting their vehicles once again. Mechanics lift engine covers, checking oil levels and tightening loose fittings after another night of constant readiness. Quartermasters unload fresh crates of bandages, blankets, medicines, and food from supply trucks that have arrived before dawn, carefully recording every item before it is stored. Inside the pharmacy tent, shelves are reorganized after the previous night's work. Empty bottles are replaced, medical instruments are sterilized once more, and fresh linens are folded into neat stacks. The routines repeat with comforting familiarity. Nothing is hurried, because every careful task completed this morning will help the staff meet whatever the next night may bring. As sunlight reaches the surrounding olive trees, birds begin their morning chorus across the quiet hills. For a few peaceful moments, the valley seems untouched by conflict. Farmers in distant fields tend to their animals where circumstances allow, church bells echo faintly from a nearby village, and mist slowly lifts from the winding roads leading through the mountains. Throughout the Italian campaign, field hospitals became places where organization, patience, and compassion quietly supported the larger effort. Doctors and nurses certainly played vital roles, but so did the cooks who prepared warm meals, the drivers who transported supplies, the mechanics who kept ambulances operating, the clerks who maintained accurate records, and the engineers who kept mountain roads open through difficult weather. Every ordinary task contributed to another person's chance of recovery. You step outside the tent and look toward the brightening sky. Behind you, the night staff finish their reports before handing responsibilities to the morning shift. There is no ceremony, only a calm exchange of information and the quiet confidence that every detail has been carefully attended to. As another day begins in the Italian hills, you realize that history is often remembered through battles and campaigns, yet it is equally shaped by places like this, where steady hands folded blankets, warmed tea, organized supplies, and cared for strangers through the longest hours of the night. Perhaps that is the most enduring lesson carried by this peaceful hospital beneath the canvas roofs. Even in the midst of war, kindness could become a daily routine, and hope could quietly arrive with the first light of dawn. The last quiet night before Germany surrendered. Waiting for morning in a quiet village. It is the evening of May 7th, 1945, in a small village in northwestern Germany. Spring has returned to the countryside. Apple trees are beginning to bloom, birds settle into the hedgerows, and the cool evening air carries the scent of damp earth after a light afternoon shower. For many soldiers, rumors have spread throughout the day that the war in Europe may soon be ending. Yet tonight, nothing official has reached your unit. As always, duty continues. You begin the evening by checking your equipment one final time. Your blanket is rolled neatly beside your pack. Boots are cleaned of dried mud collected during weeks of travel across Europe. A small stove warms a kettle of tea, while nearby cooks prepare a simple supper of bread, soup, and preserved meat. The meal is quiet, accompanied more by thoughtful silence than conversation. Around the village, ordinary routines continue. A radio operator adjusts his wireless set, listening for scheduled transmissions. Signal troops inspect telephone cables that run alongside narrow country roads. Drivers refuel trucks and check tire pressures before parking them in orderly rows for the night. Mechanics wipe grease from their hands after completing one last inspection of engines that have carried their vehicles across hundreds of kilometers. As darkness settles, sentries quietly take their positions along the edge of the village. There is little movement beyond the fields. The sounds of distant artillery, once familiar companions, have become increasingly rare. Instead, you hear the steady chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze, and somewhere nearby, the slow tolling of a church bell marking another passing hour. Inside a nearby farmhouse serving as temporary headquarters, officers study maps spread across a wooden table. Their voices remain calm and measured. Couriers arrive carrying sealed messages, while clerks continue updating reports with the same careful handwriting they have practiced throughout the campaign. No one assumes tomorrow will be different until official confirmation arrives. The village itself seems suspended between two chapters of history. Gardens are beginning to bloom once again. Farm animals rest quietly in their barns. The narrow streets, worn by years of military traffic, now lie almost still beneath the evening sky. As you settle onto your blanket beneath the soft glow of the stars, you begin to wonder whether peace arrives all at once, or whether it first appears in small moments of quiet that people scarcely notice until they have already become part of history. The night between war and peace. The hours after midnight pass with unusual stillness. The village remains wrapped in darkness, broken only by the gentle glow of covered lanterns outside a handful of buildings. You wake briefly as the watch changes. There is no urgency in the voices, only the quiet exchange of names, times, and responsibilities that has marked so many nights before this one. You pull your greatcoat a little closer against the cool spring air and step outside. Dew has begun to settle across the grass, and the cobbled lane reflects a faint shimmer beneath the moonlight. Nearby, a military truck stands silently after another long journey. Before seeking a few hours of rest, its driver walks once around the vehicle, checking the tires, tightening a loose canvas strap, and making a final note in the maintenance log. Habit continues to guide every movement. Inside the headquarters building, the wireless operator adjusts his headphones as routine messages arrive through bursts of static. Clerks continue recording reports, filing documents, and updating situation maps that now change far more slowly than they did only weeks before. No one knows exactly when the official announcement will come, so every duty is performed with the same care as always. A cook quietly lights the stove before dawn, preparing fresh coffee and porridge for the morning shift. The familiar aromas drift through the building, blending with the scent of polished leather, damp uniforms, and freshly cut firewood stacked beside the kitchen door. Around the tables, conversations remain thoughtful. Some soldiers unfold letters from home, others simply enjoy the rare comfort of sitting in silence together. Outside the village, engineers continue inspecting bridges and roads, while medical teams replenish supplies for whatever tomorrow may require. Even as hope grows stronger, preparation does not stop. Experience has taught everyone that uncertainty deserves patience. Looking toward the eastern horizon, where the darkness has begun to soften almost imperceptibly, you find yourself wondering whether history's greatest turning points are often experienced not with celebration, but with quiet expectation during the final peaceful hours before dawn. A new morning for Europe. The first light of morning spreads gently across the village rooftops. Mist hangs over nearby fields, and the branches of fruit trees shimmer with fresh dew. The air feels different, not because the landscape has changed overnight, but because the long journey through years of conflict is quietly approaching its end. You rise, fold your blanket with practiced care, and secure it to your pack just as you have done on countless mornings before. Around you, the camp slowly awakens. A cook pours steaming tea into enamel mugs while fresh bread is sliced on a wooden table. Mechanics open the hoods of parked trucks for another routine inspection, checking oil levels, coolant, and fan belts. Drivers clean their windscreens before climbing into their seats. Even on this remarkable morning, ordinary work begins first. Then, shortly after sunrise, confirmation arrives. The message is received by the wireless operator, copied carefully onto paper, and delivered to headquarters. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe has officially come to an end. There is no sudden rush of activity within your small village. Instead, people pause. Some remove their caps. Others quietly shake hands. A few simply stand in thoughtful silence, absorbing words they had hoped to hear for so long. Relief settles gradually, like the morning sunlight spreading across the fields. The routines do not disappear. Medical teams continue caring for patients. Engineers inspect bridges that will soon carry civilians instead of military convoys. Signal crews maintain communication lines, while quartermasters count supplies that will now support occupation duties, reconstruction, and humanitarian relief. The skills developed through years of hardship begin serving a different purpose. Across Europe, railways require repair. Roads must be cleared. Homes, schools, and churches await rebuilding. Families separated by war begin searching for one another. Millions of ordinary people face the quiet work of creating peace, one careful step at a time. Looking back over the long nights you have shared throughout this journey, from the underground shelters of London to Arctic convoys, desert workshops, jungle camps, radar stations, field hospitals, and lonely bridges, you begin to notice a common thread. History was sustained not only by famous commanders or decisive battles, but by mechanics tightening bolts beneath shaded lamps, nurses folding clean blankets, drivers steering supply trucks through darkness, engineers measuring rivers before dawn, cooks preparing simple meals, radio operators listening patiently through static, and countless others whose names rarely appeared in official reports. Their stories unfolded through routine rather than spectacle, through maintenance instead of celebration, through waiting, repairing, recording, cleaning, observing, and quietly helping one another endure another day. The morning sun now rises fully above the village, warming the stone walls and fresh spring grass. Birds sing as they did before the war and as they will long after it has passed. The trucks remain parked, the tools are packed away. Somewhere in the distance, church bells ring across the peaceful countryside. You take one final slow breath of the cool morning air before beginning the walk toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The years behind you have been marked by endurance. The years ahead will ask for patience of another kind. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson carried through every chapter of this journey. History is not remembered only through moments of conflict. It is also built through ordinary people who chose, day after day, to keep repairing, caring, delivering, watching, and hoping. In the end, those gentle acts of perseverance became the foundation upon which peace itself could quietly return. As the village disappears behind you and the road stretches into the bright morning, the world feels wonderfully ordinary once again. And for those who had waited through so many long nights, there could be no greater victory than the simple promise of another peaceful dawn.